Hey everyone. I thought I'd do like a Hey everyone. An
I
emergency
thought I'd do like a
an emergency
hey
channel,
everyone,
an
an
emergency
emergency. I
session.
thought I'd
Let's
do
say.
like an emergency channel.
Please let me know
An
if you
emergency
can,
session. I thought I'd
hear
say
me
an
well, if
emergency
everything's in
channel.
order.
Please let me know if
You
you
know
can session.
how
Hear
this
me
how
well.
this goes.
Please let me know if you can session. Hear me
How
well.
this goes. There's an echo.
Please let
Let's
me
see
know
what
if
I
you
can
can
do about it.
session.
Hold on.
Hear
Oh,
me
I know
well.
what's wrong. Okay, echo should be gone. I'm getting good at this. Is it better now? Is the echo gone? Okay, awesome. Thank you. Hey, thanks everyone for switching on last minute. I appreciate it. Well, I thought since the world is basically up on flames, we should have a conversation. And yeah, so I I thought it would be good to like discuss what is going on with Iran. How to interpret this both from the perspective of politics and from the perspective of um international law. Um and I think importantly, with the gravitas that it deserves, like this is a change in circumstance. Like Deep 2000 says, is it World War Three now? Like I'm not gonna say it's World War Three, but it is certainly a moment that has me concerned. It's not like it is a dangerous moment to be living through. Let's just say that. I mean, um it is not common that Israel faces both a terrorist attack and a barrage of missiles, ballistic missiles from Iran at the same time. Right. I think it is important to recognize that what is going on right now is not normal. We 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 don't have much precedent. Um, so I guess with that in mind, um, we should sort of analyze this in the broader context of what's going on in the Middle East, right? So what brought us here? And I think what has us here in these circumstances, we discussed this on the previous video that I'm still working on. I don't think it's on YouTube yet, but it should be on Twitch. Um, that this idea that constant escalation leads to de-escalation is sort of absurd. We spent a few days already, like in um, a couple of days ago, discussing this idea that, oh yeah, if you are, if you deploy enough force against, Iranians and Arabs, they will, know their place basically and shut up. And clearly, this is a strategy that will fail, right? That's not um, how politics works. It doesn't make much sense. I was thinking the other day, like, why is it that Israel is trying to invade Lebanon, send missiles to Syria, potentially attack Iran? Now Iran attacked Israel, um, and you know, be kill 40,000 Palestinians in Gaza, while its economy is collapsing, while its GDP is barely growing, while its tourist industry is decimated. It's really not very strategic thinking. And now more so because like Iran sort of has demonstrated that when it wants to send a global attack that can be easily intercepted, it can. It sends drones. Drones are easy to intercept because they're slow. It warns days in advance, right? And sort of like there was this like almost security theater last time that Iran launched an attack, and every single missile was intercepted. This time around, it was different. It was over 200 ballistic missiles, not a single drone. And of course, they overwhelmed the Iron Dome, and many of these missiles hit the ground, which is scary, right? And we don't know where these missiles hit, but we have footage that shows that these missiles have actually hit the ground. Um, and I don't think, like, if you can plan out this like from the beginning, if you say like, oh, what should the end result for Israel's campaign and reaction to October 7th look like? Having a barrage of ballistic missiles from Iran landing in Tel Aviv is not really one of the things that you would have planned when October 7th happened. The response should not end up with this, right? It's kind of crazy to feel that this could have been planned at all. That it would not be planned at all. This is a failure of the strategy of constant escalation for the escalation, right? And I also want to acknowledge, before getting into the legal analysis and the political analysis of what Iran has done, I want to acknowledge you will see a lot of coverage of this event, a lot of coverage from Western media, and it will be sympathetic. It will humanize the victims. It will talk about how Tel Aviv is a densely populated area, and that even if there is a military objective in the area, that does not mean that you get to target that area. Um, you will see all of this, and I think it is important to um, think of it in the sense of, look, why didn't you hear this kind of coverage for Palestinians? 40,000 Palestinians have died in 11 months. 500 Lebanese in densely populated cities with missile fire, with like 2,000-pound bombs, and the coverage has been completely different. So I do think it is important to acknowledge that this is something that has been going on for 11 months in Palestine, and coverage has been horrendous. So whatever you hear from Western media today about this attack, think about why did you not hear it like that in the case of Palestine. Um, and by the way, Malign Influencer and JC Vivar, thank you for following me. Thanks for helping me get to my follower goal. Actually, 290 followers. Thank you so much. What we're trying to do in this channel is try to create a space like for situations like this, really, where you're looking for commentary from, I mean, someone who studies these things for a living. So you can come here and learn and debate and discuss, and you can challenge my views. You can like press my ideas on the chat, and I will answer your questions, and I will say what I think, and I will answer your questions, and often learn from you as well, just as much as I hope that you can learn something from this channel. So thanks for following. It really does help the channel. Thank you as well, PR Patrick, for following. Um, so right, so with that in mind, with this double caveat of how do we get here? Oh, thanks Al Gaban, I think Al Gazan, for following. Um, so I think with this double caveat. Oh, thanks for subscribing, Malign Influencer. Um, of let's not forget about Palestinians today, and also let's think of this in the context of the policy of de-escalation through escalation. let's talk about what happened today, right? And of course, if you have any questions, just put them on the chat, and I will. Actually, the chat is here, and I will answer. But I think one key thing to say is how to look at the Iranian attack from the perspective of international law. I, I got food. um, so how to think from of the about this Iranian attack from the perspective of international law? And the first thing that I've been talking to friends and like colleagues and contacts, and the first thing that people ask me is, could you argue that this is a humanitarian, intervention to stop genocide in Palestine, right? And I wanted to see if I can actually let me see if I can actually do this. As longer time followers of the channel will know, I am slowly learning how to operate Twitch. And I wanted to show you now I can share some stuff on the screen. So I wanted to share with you. Let me see if I can share the official Iranian um, the official Iranian explanation for this attack. So let me see if I can do this. Hold on a second, please. I need to go here. Yeah, I'm still here. Um, here. Where is it? I think it's here. Okay, let's see if it worked. Did it work? I think it worked. So let me uh move this closer like this. Hopefully you can see better if I do this. Yeah, can you read it? Is this is the it worked. Awesome. Thanks, Malign Influencer. Um So this is the official explanation that the um, Islamic Republic of Iran has given for its strike before the UN mission of Iran has given. Um, it reads Iran's legal, rational, and legitimate response to the terrorist acts of the Zionist regime, which involved targeting Iranian nationals and interests and infringing upon the national sovereignty of the Islamic Republic of Iran, has been duly carried out. This is what Iran says. Should the Zionist regime dare to respond or commit further acts of malevolence, subsequent and crushing response will ensue. Regional states and the Zionist supporters are advised to part ways with the regime. Um, so the first thing is, like I was saying, people ask me, so is this a response to genocide in Palestine, and could you frame this as a humanitarian intervention, right? Um, from just the language here, no, right? First of all, the theory of humanitarian intervention is a controversial one, particularly when you look at international law from the perspective of the global south. Okay. Um, what do I mean? And uh, when there is a situation of humanitarian crisis, the UN Charter does not really allow states to just have carte blanche, like a blank check, to intervene and you know, quote unquote, rescue people from atrocity. It's not how the UN Charter works. That's you're supposed to use the Security Council for that. Thanks for following me, Fresh Flare. You're supposed to use the Security Council for that, right? Um, and so some states, particularly after Rwanda, the genocide in Rwanda in '94, started advancing the idea that under the UN Charter, it is only illegal to use force against the political independence or territorial integrity of a state. And so, since humanitarian intervention does not technically go against that, then it is not illegal to intervene in other states for humanitarian reasons. Um, and this theory proves controversial when um, it's sort of it can be manipulated by states. So, for example, the United States claiming that it was going to liberate Iraq, um, or for example, the way that the the way that NATO justified its bombing campaign in Kosovo, it can get controversial because then the argument is who determines what is a genuine humanitarian crisis and who doesn't. Who gets to be Kosovo and be rescued, and who gets to be Rwanda and be abandoned, right? And that should not be left to the whims and wishes of the great powers, because then otherwise there will be abuse of the rules, and so we will have more Iraqs. So the theory of humanitarian intervention sort of has lost its appeal for the global South for a long time now. Most global South states now veer towards a reduced version of R2P, responsibility to protect, where you need Security Council intervention to use force under international law, so the rules don't change. But there is now an acknowledgement that committing atrocities, like preventing atrocities, is as important as reacting to them, right? And I know there's a lot of activity on the chat, so I will address your questions in a minute. Just let me round up my idea. So from a global south perspective, this idea that states have permission to just intervene militarily in other states um, for humanitarian reasons is not really very popular, right? Um, oh, thanks, Karalea85 for following me. Now, what does this mean for us? Well, the first thing that I would argue is that Iran is not claiming a right to humanitarian intervention here. Nothing in this, in that statement over there, says anything about humanitarian intervention. They are not acting to protect Palestinians. They are acting to protect Iranian nationals and interests, right? And this is just not how humanitarian intervention works. You need to invoke it. So it's not humanitarian intervention, and we can talk about how this would work. Like, for example, the UK has a particular interpretation of how humanitarian intervention should work, um, that we can read and see. Oh, could this possibly be legal under the UK's interpretation of international law, which would be highly ironic because I'm sure that the UK is going to say that this is illegal. But under their own rationale for attacking Syria in 2018, I don't know. Maybe if Iran had phrased things differently, then the UK's own interpretation would bounce back in their face. The second possibility is that this is self-defense. But first of all, it cannot be self-defense vis-a-vis Palestine if Palestine has not invoked the right to collective self-defense. So the state of Palestine or Lebanon could claim that it has suffered that they have suffered an armed attack by Israel, um, which is a plausible interpretation of facts under at least how I see things, right? And because of that armed attack, call upon other states to engage in self-defense. And since consent is a valid, mechanism for using force in international law, then if a state heeds the call for protection, then it is acting in self-defense collectively in favor of the attacked state. Right. This is essentially, of course, this was done through Security Council authorization, but the general idea with Iraq's invasion of Kuwait was sort of similar. Kuwait requested the help of the world, and it was liberated from Iraqi um, attack. So it's not self-defense of Palestine. It's not collective self-defense. Um, you could argue that it is self-defense for Iran itself, right? Is it self-defense for Iran? And because this is what they are claiming, right? They are claiming that their actions were, I'm reading here, legal, rational, and legitimate responses to terrorist acts, which involved the targeting of Iranian nationals and interests and infringing upon the national sovereignty of the Islamic Republic of Iran. I see someone followed me, so thank you, Buguima, for following me. Um, and okay, so let's analyze. Let's think about this, right? Um, First of all, can you claim self-defense in another country over the protection of nationals? This is something that Israel is a strong defender of. So the irony is not lost here. Israel has long argued that if there is an Israeli person at risk anywhere in the world, then that allows Israel to engage in self-defense. You may remember the very famous Entebbe operation, right? In that Entebbe was in Entebbe was in Uganda, right? I think I might be. Sorry, I forgot. Um, yeah, it was Uganda. Um, and where there were yeah, the plane thing with the witty week. Oh, Pegasus B, thanks for following. So there were Israeli hostages in an airport in Entebbe, and the basically the Ugandan government was not allowing the anything to happen, either the rescue or the anything. It was just stuck there. So Israel sent a elite group of soldiers, including Benjamin Netanyahu's brother, if I am not mistaken, to rescue the hostages. And the operation was a success. They rescued the hostages and left. So under the Israeli interpretation, when there is a risk to your own nationals abroad, you can claim self-defense. Um, this is not really very passive, very universal among scholars. It is a controversial theory. Some say you can, some say you cannot. I'm among those because I'm generally against expansive interpretations of uses of force. I'm generally against this idea that protection of nationals authorizes extraterritorial uses of force without consent. Um, so at least in my interpretation of facts, um, protection of nationals is something that happens in in your own territory or diplomatically. Just because you again anything that grants a state a unilateral right to say I have a right to intervene without any kind of like objective test to me is suspect. So I would not consider targeting Iranian nationals as a justification for self-defense. And we can get into more detail later about the proportionality and necessity of the strikes. I know there's more, you know, meat here, but let me take these assertions at face value first and then go into the legal standard. So I would not argue that targeting of Iranian nationals triggers self-defense so that for us to start looking at necessity and proportionality. I would not do that. So I also don't think that would trigger self-defense. Um, and then you would need to tell me what is the armed attack that Iran is responding to at this time, right? Is it the Pagers attack? Is it the bombing campaign in Lebanon? Is it the which armed attack has Iran suffered from Israel? And I can't think of any, right? So if there's no armed attack, then there's no self-defense. So we've gone through humanitarian intervention, self-defense, protection of nationals, responsibility to protect. What is left? What's left is a concept called reprisal. A reprisal is something illegal that you do because the other party also did something illegal, right? It's sort of like an excuse for breaking the law because someone else broke the law. And under international law, famously, armed reprisals are forbidden. So you cannot carry out an act of aggression if someone else carries out an act of aggression against you. Julio Sulo123, thanks for following. Um, so I'm I'm thinking here. Okay, if there's no armed attack, then there's no self-defense. Now, um, armed reprisals are this thing where you essentially you exchange missiles in revenge. So revenge, to use colloquial terms, is not a valid reason to go to war, not a valid reason to use force. So um, usually the only way that you can be authorized to use force is if someone launches an armed attack against you and you use force to stop it. So you can use force. So for example, if someone launches a missile against you, you have a self-defense right to blow it up, and you have a right to sort of like attack wherever that missile came from. And again, this it starts to get murky the farther away from the moment of the attack that you get. you can with every passing moment, you get like less of a justification to carry out more attacks to like prevent the 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 original armed attack from being fulfilled. So someone shoots a missile at you, you can shoot the missile down, you can shoot the place from where the missile came from, and then maybe you can carry out a few like auxiliary attacks around there to make sure that that base is not used again, or that maybe there's another base that you feel that might be used against you. You can carry out some more attacks. But once that attack is final, it's done, you cannot then say and then some. Right? That's not how the UN Charter is worked out. You cannot then escalate and say, "Oh yeah, you tried to take out my I don't know my base. I will take out your base, your city, your like your headquarters, your ministry." That's not a proportional or necessary response. The response needs to be necessary, meaning that you need to take action to prevent being attacked, and it needs to be proportionate in that whatever you do cannot be, let's put the simple example of if someone slaps you, you can't shoot them back, right? Um, so there is no in this context, what Iran is doing is clearly to me an armed reprisal. It's a revenge for something that hurt it. It's a political discussion here. Iran is essentially feeling that Israel is encroaching into its, let's say, sphere of influence, or it's whatever you want to call it, in the Middle East, and it needs to do something in response. Now, could have Iran, created a better rationale? Maybe, but I don't see how this can be legal. This just sounds like a reprisal to me, and it applies both ways. Like Israel is allowed to defend itself from these attacks by destroying the missiles, by maybe destroying the launchers from the missiles. But if Israel, waits a week and starts preparing a counterattack that is not directed at these launchers, that is directed, let's say, at Iran's nuclear program. That's another reprisal. That's a reprisal against the reprisal. And Bilal224, thanks for following me. So a reprisal to the reprisal to the reprisal to the reprisal is essentially a set of illegalities. Of course, at some point, re- subsequent reprisals can end up looking like just hostilities and become a war. Like, if you look at the typical scenario, let's say you have a battalion of tanks going into your territory, that is an armed attack. Since the tanks keep coming, at some point your self-defense arguments become hostilities, become a war. So bear that in mind with like these like infinity exchange of reprisals. We are risking war, if not already. Like an international armed conflict already exists between Iran and Israel. It is up to this moment to determine if what's going to happen is a broader war or if we're going to de-escalate for once. Right, so bear that in mind as we go forward. Witty Week, thanks for subscribing. That's awesome. Thank you so much. Oh wow, we have 63 viewers right now. I don't think we've ever had so many. Um, okay, so what we are, where we are right now is this conclusion. Then, okay, the Iranian attack is, at least to me, feel free to like disagree with me, but at least to me, it's an unlawful reprisal under international law. So would an Israeli reprisal, right, that launches later. Um, and this puts us in a situation where we are essentially in a Cuban Missile Crisis scenario, waiting to see what's going to happen. And please keep an eye out on Twitter because I'm like talking here, so I'm not checking Twitter right now. So if something happens, please let me know. I would also say that it is important to analyze the Iranian strike from two perspectives. One is the one that we have done right now, which is jus ad bellum. Jus ad bellum is the body of law that analyzes the causes to go to war. How is it that you can go to war? So under that, this strike is illegal under international law. There's also the international humanitarian law, because from the moment that you launch an attack, that attack is also governed by the rules of jus in bello, which is called humanitarian law, international humanitarian law, which covers the conduct of hostilities. So there's a lot of discussion about first strikes and whether they are or not governed by humanitarian law or human rights. I'm not going to get into too much detail in that discussion. I might, I wrote an article about it. I might just pop it in the chat. That might be a good idea. Um, but uh, but let's assume, for sake of argument, that this strike is covered also by international humanitarian law, not just by the law on the use of force, by the use of bellum, but also by the use in bellum. Right? If that attack targets a military target, then it can be legal under the use in bello, even if it is illegal under the use at bello. Right? It is not unlawful to target um, military objectives. So, I mean, we don't know what these missiles have struck. So, hopefully, at least, hopefully, it is against military objectives. As far as I know, this is what U.S. intelligence had been briefed on, that Iran was targeting military objectives. Um, but then again, of course, remember that there are military objectives that sometimes have to be, well, not have to, but are often placed in cities. Like, for example, the Mossad headquarters is in the middle of Tel Aviv. So that is also something to consider in the broader context of what I was discussing with regards to Palestine. Um, under Let's assume that Iran is targeting the Mossad headquarters in the middle of Tel Aviv, then that strike, just like the Pager strike, just like any other strike so far that Israel has carried out, would have needed to conduct not just a use ad bellum analysis of, is this an armed reprisal, is this humanitarian intervention, what is it? It would also need to conduct a use in bello analysis to determine, will my ballistic missile, harm civilians if it explodes in the middle of Tel Aviv? Right, because you complied with distinction, the principle of distinction that says that you can only target combatants. You still need to comply with the principle of proportionality once you hit a military target. Will my ballistic missile harm civilians? So hopefully that has not happened. I'm not aware of any casualties so far. And well, yeah. So there's a two-level analysis with this strike. One is under the use in bello, and one is under the use at bello. Okay. Okay. So basically, in broad strokes, that is what I think right now about the legality of the situation. Of course, as I was talking with a friend on Twitter, I think it was Mark Kirsten. I'm not exactly sure. Um, no, it was Marco Longobardo, who's a friend of mine, an Italian scholar. International law is sort of dead at this point, right? Israel is not respecting it. Um, Iran has not respected it. The United States, Germany are not respecting it. Um, Security Council resolutions are being, disobeyed. Um, ICJ decisions are being ignored. Security Council resolutions are being described as non-binding. Like, it is sort of weird to me. Um, and so it is a sad moment for international law. Because I'm not sure what to do as someone who values the role that international law plays in the community, or in the international community. It is still um, dark because violence begets violence. I'm saddened by it, but not surprised that there was a terror attack in Israel. Um, because the violence is getting to such levels that if recourse to law takes too long, and just look at the ICC arrest warrants. I mean, come on. Um, if recourse to law is insufficient, then in in a set of laws that is as high stakes as international law, running a red light, like the equivalent of running a red light, ends up with dead people. Because in international politics, the equivalent of running a red light is launching a war. It's as simple as that. So running the proverbial red light in international law will lead to stuff like this, will lead to like the self-help of the anarchical society that realists like to talk about, in a society that is not governed exclusively by states. The time where states were the main actors of international politics is long gone, in my opinion. Like, you have corporations, you have like non-state armed groups, you have all sorts of like actors that are operating in international politics, and they all have their own interests and their own policies and their own actions. And it is naive to operate in the world thinking that, oh no, they don't matter, only states matter, and so who cares. um so the lack of ability, the failure of the international community to see international law, to present international law as an escape valve, is what we're seeing right now. I don't think this means that international law is useless, that it never works, that it cannot work, that we should abandon it. Um, I think it is a moment where we need to recognize what are the origins and the roots. Oh, ad coming in a minute. Let me see if I can deal with that. Um, it's important to see that international law, um, at its core, is a product of colonialism and imperialism. Um, it is the tool that allowed for the colonization of Africa. It is the tool that allowed for the imperial designs of the United States in Latin America. It has a long history of doing what it is, what's happening now. The main difference is that now we have a global south that is much more active and much more powerful than at any other point in history. And this is something that I always mention. It is very important to me that global south states act as enforcers of the rule of law as much as possible. And so right now we have states like Chile, we have states like Brazil, we have states like South Africa that are trying to do that. And they're a counterbalance to the, let's say, the game, quote unquote, game of the quote unquote, great powers. Because when you have states that want to gain power to bend the rules, that's the traditional thing. That's what's always happened. That's the US, that's Russia, that's potentially China now, that's the UK, France. These are states that want power so they can bend the rules. South Africa, Chile, Brazil don't seem to want to gain reputational power to bend the rules, but to enforce them. And we need more of those because in moments like this, we really desperately need to get us back into the negotiation table, get us to sit back down and de escalate what right now looks like a regional war where the United States might then, help Israel to retaliate against Iran and then all hell breaks loose. Right. So, um, I do fear for international law. And I do hope that these states, that the global south that we're seeing, can construct an international law that sort of escapes its roots as best as we can and use it as a tool of enforcement for international rules and for rule of law. Right, so hopefully we can do that. I'm not naive in thinking that international law is the panacea that will fix everything. I don't think that. Um, I also don't think that we can ever just simply rely on international law because of its roots, because of its problems. But I do think that we can push back against it and like change the discourse, change the narrative in important ways. And I think that is already happening. It's just happening too slow uh, for what Palestine needs or for what the region needs. So saying that Palestine is a state 10 years ago was controversial. Trust me, I know because I used to say it, and my colleagues would say, like, well, I mean, is it really a state? Can you really say that it's a state? You know, um, now that's not the case. Now, I was talking to some friends the other day and I was like, well, I have this like weird view, this minority view that Palestine is a state. And they all looked at me saying like, no, that's not weird. We all agree. And it's like, oh, interesting. I'm not sure if you would have agreed with me 10, 15 years ago. Right. So, and I mean, I'm from Peru. Like Peru recognized Palestine in 2011. So to me, it's not been weird for a very long time. Um, so the way we understand the world is changing, particularly with younger generations. But it's just not changing fast enough. So yeah, I guess we need to like increase the pressure for international law to like do something about this. Like, where is the Security Council right now? Why is it that this is being discussed bilaterally between the United States and Israel? We need a meeting for the Security Council now. Like, wake up and go to the meeting, right? Um. Oh, by the way, the Pro Pork. Thanks for following me. Um. So right now, what I feel is we have a situation at the brink of something horrible, and we can either take the Kennedy way during the Cuban Missile Crisis, or we can not and bring even more suffering to everyone in the region: Israelis, Palestinians, um, Lebanese, Iranians. No one benefits from a regional war. Okay, so that's what I think, and that's my legal analysis. So hopefully this is useful to you. I'm gonna go through the chat, see what you guys are saying, try to engage with your questions, and then I mean honestly, I'll probably just wrap it up because this is like an emergency stream. Okay, I don't think I'm gonna last 2 hours today, but let's see where we end up. So let me go through the chat, okay? Because there's a lot of stuff in the chat. Okay, so let's see. So random Twitter accounts. Witty Week says random Twitter accounts are claiming that the IDF is suppressing any reports of casualties. For now, I don't know if it's true. I have no idea either. I I mean, it depends on how you define casualties, particularly if the attacks were directed at military targets. So bear that in mind. But yeah, I don't know. Uh, Persoboro, thanks for following me. Um, okay, so let's see what else is in the chat. Um, so SV5679 says, isn't it a response to Israel bombing Tehran, to killing Haniyeh in Tehran during the inauguration? Um, but this was like a long time ago, right? So it's not really, it's not really necessary and proportional because like it's been so long that the arms attack already ended, right? So that's not really an excuse. Um, so Burnhunk, hi Burnhunk says, World War Three stream. Like, I hope not. um, but I agree with Magic of Carols. The fear is real. Um, so I'm not sure I understand what your point is, Chameleon Eyes 11. Um, So Malign Influencer says the US has also advanced that logic, right? We have troops training foreign forces abroad, especially in Africa, that have used force against non-state actors and justified it on the basis of self-defense. Well, that's a big debate, a big discussion right now in international law between mostly global South and global North authors, I think. Although some global North authors as well. Of course, I'm generalizing. No, it's a very specific type of global North scholar, usually with a more military background. Uh, they've been trying to like expand the views of expand the definition of self-defense ever since the war on terror. So the United States, for example, argues that um, it is engaged in an armed conflict against all terrorist groups in the world, and so it is legal for them to act in self-defense against those armed groups, those terrorist groups. And that if they meet the requirement for self-defense under international law as they see it, I'll talk about how they see it in a minute. But if they meet the requirements for international law for self-defense, then that's all they need to do. You can forget about international humanitarian law. You don't need anything else. You just need international use of force law to be compliant with. So self-defense is a get out of jail card, free card, that allows the United States to target anyone anywhere in the world. And self-defense for them means if you are a terrorist organization, and the state where you are at is not, trying to arrest you or is incapable of getting you arrested, then um, I am threatened. I, the United States, the global superpower, I'm threatened. And so I have a right to bomb that state, which is, of course, from a global south perspective, absurd because non state threats are not really covered by the UN Charter, at least not if you follow the negotiation history of the UN Charter. Non state threats, if you wanted to address non state threats, the original plan was you go to the Security Council. But since the Security Council doesn't work, what global North states have started doing is say, well, if the Security Council is not an option, then why don't we expand the definition of self defense so that we can bomb more places? So essentially, what you're seeing is an exchange of instead of watering down, superpower power by say limiting the veto and fixing the Security Council, what the global north is requesting the world is how about we water down global south sovereignty so that we can bomb more global south countries in more scenarios. And that's just an equation that is never going to fly with global south states. So while global north states are arguing, if you're a terrorist group, I am threatened. And if nothing is happening to you wherever you are, I can attack you in self defense. That is all that I need to show. That's my job is done. Global south states like Mexico, like Brazil, are saying, no, no, wait a minute. You need to actually be threatened. There actually needs to be an armed attack underway from a state for you to be able to claim self defense. If it's not a state, then you need to go to the Security Council. Oh, but they don't work. It's too difficult to reform the Security Council. Well, that's your problem. It also should be difficult to water down my sovereignty. So why is watering down my sovereignty easy, but reforming the Security Council is not easy? Both are difficult. Why should the chain break on the weakest link? That's more or less the debate that we're seeing here, with states that want to expand the definition of self-defense so that they can use force in more places all over the world with less stringent requirements, and those countries that are usually the ones that are being bombed saying, no, 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 that's not how I want the UN Charter to work. Come on, right? So Jascom R says, "How about genocide prevention?" I discussed that in the beginning. So there is a video on demand section on my channel, so you can go back and listen. But generally, what I said at the beginning is that's not even what if you sorry here if you see what Iran is saying, that's not what they're claiming. They're not claiming that they're trying to prevent genocide. Um, Bagel Goose says, "R.I.P. Iran." Well, I don't know what's going to happen. To be honest, I think it's reasonable to assume that there's going to be some level of retaliation from Israel. I don't know if the U.S. will be involved. I saw Lindsey Graham was already calling for like bombing Iran. There's a big group of neocons in the U.S. that has been wanting to bomb Iran for like 24 years, if not more. Right? Bagel Goose says international law is a joke. I don't think that is a joke. I just feel that it is limited because of its own history and how it came into being. I mean, as someone who studies international law and is 100% in agreement that it is a flawed, body of rules. I don't think it is a joke. I don't think it is completely irrelevant. I think it is important to keep, even if it's difficult to enforce. For the same reason that I'm not willing to like give away traffic rules because they're difficult to enforce. Just because there's always a bike that almost runs me over doesn't mean that, traffic rules don't make sense. We should just do away with them. I don't think it works like that. I don't think it should work like that. Condor 92 sort of like saying the same thing as Bagel Goose says, but with Israel ignoring international law, does it matter? And I mean, I understand the frustration. But I do feel that the idea of reciprocity in non-compliance with international law is not a good recipe. You know, um, I will do something horrible if you do something horrible. Just leaves you with two horrible things, and neither of those two horrible things addressed or remedied. So for the longest time, we've sort of accepted now that um, revenge is not good law. So I would say it is important, even if Israel is not complying with the law, even if the United States is not complying with international law. It is still important to keep it in mind. Okay, chemistry. Thanks for following. Uh, so Burhung is talking with Magic of Carols. Fax Monkey 77 says everyone is ignoring international law. I absolutely get your frustration, guys. Like I study international law for a living. I am an international lawyer by training. I'm just an international lawyer that spends his time reading international law and concluding international law is a flawed construct. Um, but yeah, I share the frustration. I do. I there is a big problem in our hands right now. If the law is only as good as the people who comply with it, like decide. Like if we all decide tomorrow that the law doesn't matter, then the law disappears. Law requires human, conviction to matter, to be binding. Um, Bagel Goose says Israel 100% going to take out Iran's oil facilities and nuclear facilities. Yeah, it probably is, and that also won't be legal. it will also be, it will also be a reprisal, and we'll just have a war of reprisals, which is all illegal. So, um, let's see what else. Madalena Day says, Matt Alina Day, sorry, says this is so good. It reads like an article. You must do this on X. I'm definite now for a wider reach and double reach. Love this. Oh, I'm glad this is useful. I'm really happy. Like usually I would do a Twitter thread, but I think this is more interactive and this allows you to like talk more with me. So I thought it would be better to just hop on to Twitch. Um, Belal224 is the view of all of this from Jordan is wild. Or are you in Jordan right now? What is the mood there in Jordan right now, Belal? Um, what about human rights law? Asks Madalena Day. So the connection between human rights law and use of force is a complicated one. Because so generally we accept that when you launch an armed attack, when you launch an attack on a state under the jus ad bellum, you launch an attack, right? We accept that for the system to make sense, that attack needs to be covered by two sets of laws. The jus ad bellum, that says whether the attack is legal or not as a valid use of force, and international humanitarian law, or the jus in bellum, that says whether the person that's going to be the target that's going to be hit is going to be a lawful or unlawful target, right? So usually IHL is thought out as in the concept of hostilities. So once the war starts, when you conduct your hostilities, are you committing war crimes or not? But with the first strike, there's usually a problem because if it's the first strike, does the armed conflict exist already or not? Right. So there's different theories. Generally, we think that with use of force between states, um, any use of force triggers an armed conflict, an international armed conflict. Um, Regardless of whether it is legal or not to launch the attack. So the attack can be illegal under the jus ad bellum. It still triggers an armed attack. It still triggers IHL when it lands. Let's say, right? Um, but there is uh, even if this were not the case, even if like there is no armed conflict, then human rights would continue to apply. And so the general consensus by the Human Rights Council, in its General Comment 36, I think it is, says that whenever a attack violates the jus ad bellum, right? So it's an unlawful attack under the use of force regime, not under international humanitarian law necessarily. Even if the target is legal, if the attack violates the jus ad bellum, and I know this is complicated, so if you don't get it, let me know. um, then that would violate human rights because it would be an arbitrary deprivation of life. So you would end up having three different sets of laws applying at the same time for the same strike. One set of laws would tell you if the launching of the missile is legal or not under international law. Is it an act of aggression or a legitimate use of force? That's the jus ad bellum. The second set of laws would be international humanitarian law, which would tell you if it's a war crime or not. Right? And the third set of laws would be human rights, which usually would fall in line with international humanitarian law. Whatever international humanitarian law says, um, human rights follows. So if it's a war crime, then it's a violation of human rights. But if it's an illegal strike under the jus ad bellum, so it's an act of aggression, let's say, but it is not a war crime, it can still be illegal under human rights because it is an act of aggression. An act of aggression cannot have legal repercussions. So it might be the case that it is legal under IHL, but illegal under human rights. It's a complicated thing. So I didn't want to go into that from the beginning because I know it's complicated. Um, and in this situation, I think it's not as complicated. Um, but yeah, there's essentially there's like three sets of laws that can potentially apply. Sometimes human rights and humanitarian law coincide. We call this the lex specialis principle. Whatever IHL does, human rights does. Simple. But that's not always the case, especially in these like single strikes. So I wrote an article on that. I'll see if I can put it in the chat so that you can see it. Hold on. Uh, I'm typing. Sorry. Okay, so I wrote this, so I'm gonna put it in the chat. so you can see it. If you um if you are in the Discord group that we have, I will also put it there. Okay. So, what else? What else? What else? What else? So I see there's a lot of people that have their first chat with us. So Bint Dijla, first chat, welcome. Belal224, also your first chat, so welcome to the community as well. Um, Fresh Flair is asking for reading recommendations, and it's your first chat with us as well, so welcome. I will put more recommendations in the reading. Um, what I can do is I can also recommend people for you to follow on Twitter that will be definitely be commenting on this. I'll do that in a minute. Persoboro, also first time chat. Welcome. Loco Bielsa, also first time chat. Welcome. Um, oh, hi, Professor Trakis. It's nice to see you. So let me continue to go through the chat and see what else I can answer. Jay Maru, thanks for following. Okay, so Bagel Goose says, you think long term this benefits or hinders Russia? On one hand, if Iran's oil facilities are taken out, Russian oil becomes more valuable. On the other hand, Iran is a large arms dealer and manufacturer for their war effort. Yeah, I don't think it's good for Russia to. Uh, I think at this point, Russia is buying a lot of weapons from Iran, so I'm not sure that this Iran needing to like focus on defense would not necessarily be a good thing for Russia right now. I would think that more. Like I would think this is bad for Russia, but I guess we need more information. Normie123 says very grim, but just saw a tweet from International Law Academic, which unfortunately resonates a lot right now. Quote: "We will have nukes flying before arrest warrants." I hope not. I hope the nuclear taboo holds. I hope cooler minds prevail. Um, Besides, right now in the Middle East, Iran, as far as we know, doesn't have nukes. Only that we know of. We believe that Israel does have nukes, but not Iran. So hopefully that's not the case. Um, Iconoclast asks, isn't it a bit optimistic to think the international community will reflect on what's happening? The US, who is running the show now, no, they're not respecting international law. Why would they suddenly reflect on their actions? Yeah, I mean, sure, I see your point. I don't think the US is thinking in terms of the law when it comes to Israel. It's thinking exclusively in terms of, the projection of interests in other regions. So no, I don't think they will reflect at all. Yeah, it is optimistic, but it is my let's call it what should happen, not what necessarily I think will happen. Malign Influencer says, you mentioned earlier that an armed conflict exists between Israel and Iran. Can you talk about when you think it started, what triggered it? The years, decades long tit for tat attacks in the region have me confused about when a given conflict between two belligerents began for purposes of international law. So, okay, I'm just going to focus on armed conflicts between states because non-state armed groups have a different standard. But essentially, this is pretty easy. Two states are engaged in an armed conflict whenever they engage in armed violence, armed force against the other. There was a famous International Law Association report that argued that there needed to be a threshold that not every cross-border, skirmish could end up triggering armed conflict. But I disagree. I feel that they got a little bit too overexcited. I don't think the evidence supports that. I think the existence of an armed conflict between two states exists from the moment of the first use of force, because we want these uses of force to be covered by international humanitarian law, right? So yeah, I would say. Um, Now the question is whether the armed conflict has been ongoing, and I guess that depends on what you think Iran is doing with these like proxy actors in the region. If you believe that these proxy actors, Hezbollah, the Houthis, Hamas, if you believe that you can assign their conduct to Iran and that they are acting on behalf of Iran, which is Israel's argument, then anything that happens between Hezbollah, Hamas, and Israel are part of the conflict between Israel and Iran. So you would have an ongoing conflict, a much longer conflict. So, and if that's the case, then this is just one single use of force within a broader armed conflict, which is I think is Israel's position. Um, if not, if you don't think that the standard for overall control or effective control over these proxy groups has been met, and honestly, I don't have enough information to make that determination right now. It could be that they have sufficient control over them. Um, but if they don't, then yeah, then the armed conflict would start from the moment that the armed attack is initiated against Israel, right? So from the moment that they said launch the rockets, essentially. Um, let's see. Who else? Let me read the chat for a minute. Um, Deepen 2000 says apparently a Palestinian was killed by Iranian bombing. That's tragic. I'm so sorry to hear. Um, was it a Palestinian citizen of Israel or a Palestinian in Palestine? Fax Monkey 77 says that this global south is a mirage. I don't think so. Um, as a global southerner, I think the global south is a complicated concept to grasp. Oh, from Jericho. Okay, that's. Uh, I mean, it would be tragic either way, but like, um, thanks for telling me. I think the global south is a complicated concept to grasp. I personally don't think that the global south is a geographical concept at all. Like, I don't think the global south is like you draw a line on a map. I think the global south is formed by peoples who share a history of colonial and imperialistic oppression, basically the others of the world. So you can have people in the global north, technically the geographical global north, that qualify as global south. So, for example, I would absolutely say that um, indigenous people in Canada and the United States, African Americans, um, they have a valid claim to being global south. And I think that there are people in the global south, geographically speaking, um, that have very colonial and very imperialistic views, and so therefore uh, are making a claim to the global north. And I just think that is an unrequited claim to the global north. I don't think the global north will ever accept, either Latin America. Say, for example, typical thing that you see Hindu nationalists defending Israel making claims to global northernness. I don't think they will ever be accepted in the global north. Just like Latin Americans are not accepted in the West, in the concept of the West. So I think there are people that live in the geographical global south that want to be part of the global north, and I think there's people who live in the geographical global north that are actually global south. So I don't think it's a geographical concept. I think it's a set of relations, people with similar histories and lived experiences. I don't think that just because you come from the global south, you're noble and revolutionary and like good. I think a lot of horrible stuff has happened in the global south. I'm from Peru. My country has committed countless genocides against indigenous peoples, and I'm happy to point that out. Um, so in that regard, I don't think it's a mirage. I think it's a very real group of people, even at an individual level. Um, so yeah, I don't think it's a mirage. Oh, hi, Rosa Tolerance. How are you? I just saw your comments. Uh, so Fax Monkey 77 says, "How do you think South Africa or Chile can enforce anything?" Well, I think actually that take for example the German case, Nicaragua versus Germany at the ICJ. Germany has considerably reduced and at some points even suspended arms sales to Israel ever since March of 2024. Why March 2024? Because that's when Nicaragua sued Germany at the ICJ. Simple as that. So I'm not saying that they are enforcers in the sense of they will put their foot down and then the US will tremble in its knees and surrender. That's sort of like the old school way of doing things that I don't agree with. I think they are trying to use the system for the better. And so, yeah, I think they are. I think South Africa's case at the ICJ has created a lot of problems for Israel in trying to enforce the rule of law. Let's see. Madalena Day says Global South can consolidate international law. Just reread it back. There's actually a very good article. I'm gonna send it your way. Hold on. Let me see if I can find it. Let me see if I can find it. Here it is. Awesome. Uh, so it's an article by Ralph Wild, who's a friend of mine and an excellent scholar. You might have seen him go sort of viral in the ICJ advisory opinion case because he presented the case of the Arab League. And he wrote an article that's called "Using the Master's Tools to Dismantle the Master's House: International Law and Palestinian Liberation." So I'm going to share it in the chat so you guys can read it. And it is basically that. It is basically trying to um, use international law or interpret international law in ways that are consistent with an interpretation of international law that puts self-determination at the forefront, not security interests and not geopolitics, but self-determination. And it's a very interesting article. You should really read it. I really like it. Ralph is a great scholar and a really good friend. So take a look. um Let me see who else is in the chat. um Let me see. We have some first chatters as well. So Al Ghassan, this is your first time chatting here. He says, "Would you consider these random attacks and the indiscriminate use of force by Israel its death throes? And is there a chance that U.S. starts withholding support?" Okay. So I am very surprised that Israel is doing what it is doing right now at the time that it is doing it. I was talking about this in the beginning. I don't understand how Israel is justifying invading Lebanon and attacking Gaza and getting into a regional war with Iran at a time when its economy is, Fitch ratings and Moody's ratings have downgraded its credit rating. Its GDP is not growing anymore; they're growing at 0.7%. Tourism industry is in tatters. Strategically, it doesn't make sense. What what seems to be the case is that how you guys are telling me that international law doesn't work, that it's useless, and that doesn't matter. It does seem to me what my hypothesis is that Israel has realized that whatever it doesn't achieve in this current iteration of its pursuit of permanent security for its colonial project in Palestine, whatever it doesn't accomplish now, it likely won't accomplish it for a very long time. Either because it'll run out of money and it'll have to stop, or because the status quo of the world will change, right? Because younger generations will not ever, I think, see Israel in the same light again. Um, and Israel has already alienated Jordan, a traditional ally. It has alienated Egypt, traditional ally. It's alienated France, a strong ally. Um, it has really maneuvered itself into a very isolated position. So whatever it doesn't accomplish now, it might not accomplish ever. So that's why I think it's trying to accomplish as many strategic objectives to call them something in the shortest amount of time possible. Um, so let's see who else. Um, no, Perso Boro says the U.S. doesn't consider itself subject to international law. Well, they claim that they have their own way of complying with it, but I generally agree. Um, they're not very good at following international law. Um, Huck Finn says, I think it's your first time chat as well. Huck Finn says, there's a State Department briefing right now. Uh, Loco Bielsa says, in this case, the Security Council did not solve the South Lebanon problem, and the non-state actors started a war against Israel. Do you really expect for there to be no possible action by an attacked country? So I value this question. I think it's an important one. So um, I actually addressed this on my last stream. Um, because it goes to the question of what else are we supposed to do? And I think this what else are we supposed to do is premised on the idea that the Arab mind, Arab people, um, only understand violence, and you need to teach them a lesson to put them in their place so that they de-escalate. This is the idea of escalation, de-escalation through escalation, right? This has been in the media. This is plain to see. This is what Israel believes, that if you just hammer down on Hezbollah, they will learn their lesson and stay quiet. And the same with Hamas, and the same with Iran, and like the Middle Eastern mind, Persian, Arab, they are all like that. They need to be taught lessons. And I just don't see this as reasonable in history because not that long ago, Israel was mortal enemies with Jordan, mortal enemies with Egypt. And yet, Israel was able to find common ground to sign peace treaties with both of them. And so it is possible to engage with these actors who like hate you, right? It is possible to find deals with, Arab leaders and Arab people. So when these groups um, appear, um, you also have partners all around the region that are willing to listen. Like the Jordanian ambassador in the UN was desperate the other day, saying, "We are ready to just send a force of Arab countries into Palestine with blue helmets to secure the borders of Israel. Just accept that there should be a Palestinian state, and we will be there to protect you. And you can declare a Palestinian state, and then you can, in Spanish we say, remove the floor from all of these violent actors that are threatening you, that claim to be doing this because of a defense of solidarity with Palestinians. So if you think that is a bluff, call their bluff. End the occupation. Why can't you end the occupation? That's what international law requires of you. That's what everyone in the region wants. And the reason is you can't end the occupation because the project here is more than just self determination for Jewish people. It is also a project of denying self determination to Palestinians, of annexing the West Bank, of annexing Arab land, as the ICJ has recently declared. So it's not about whether I think it's reasonable or not for an attacked party not to respond. What I think is um, these attacks are happening in the context of a broader dynamic that, yes, of course, when October the 7th happened, that was a huge amount of war crimes collected in a tiny moment in time, in a day. Like, it was horrible. I've seen images that will haunt me. It was a horrible event. It was illegal with huge amounts of war crimes. I wholeheartedly condemn doing that. And I don't think in any way that advances the cause of decolonization for Palestinians. I don't think killing civilians advances the cause for decolonization. But when you are in that situation, when you see that world, when you realize what's happened from 1948, the start of the colonial project, to 2024, today, and you see that you have gone from, surviving the Holocaust to experiencing October 7th. Was it really your idea that the denouement of this whole process of 7 decades of existing was going to end up in something as horrible as October 7th? Of course not. Something went wrong along the way in those 7 decades of existence for Israel that led to October 7th. And I feel that what went wrong is the idea of Israel that amassing power and teaching lessons to Arabs is the way to go. Because that only created more and more violent actors. We went from, the Arab neighbors of Israel to the PLO, and then to Hamas, which was a reaction to the Intifada, and then to Hezbollah in Lebanon. Every single time that Israel tries to squeeze the region harder to teach more lessons, another violent actor pops up. And yet, in the same period of time, many other actors have stepped down from violence and said, okay, let's talk. Jordan, Egypt, right? Even Saudi Arabia for a while was saying, like, okay, let's talk, right? The Palestinian Authority The Palestinian Authority has seen 40,000 Palestinians killed. 40,000. And has not lifted a muscle in violence. It has gone to the ICJ, it has gone to the ICC. It has not declared an intifada, it has not called for self defense. Um, they have not engaged in violence. So there's a lot of people out there in the region that are saying, let's talk, let's engage. To the point where you have people in this chat room right now calling the Palestinian Authority pathetic because they have not recourse to violence. But they are there, not recurring to violence. So this idea that the Arab mind can only understand violence and you need to teach them lessons, that is the flaw. So when October the 7th happened, there were two options. Option number one was to say, we need to teach them an even bigger lesson. Or you could have said, you know what, the status quo is not working. This idea that we need to continuously teach Arabs lessons to secure this colonial project that we have created called Israel occupying Palestinian land, and we need to teach them a lesson to like put them in their place so that they let us be, it's not working. We need to end the occupation. Call the bluff of the violent actors and engage with those that are saying, you know, we can put blue helmets in the West Bank right now and you can declare the existence of the Palestinian state right now. You don't need to engage in negotiations. We'll put in the blue helmets and you declare the existence that you recognize the Palestinian state. That's what needed to happen. So I don't like this idea of what do you expect an attacked state to do, Loco Bielsa? Um, I think the best thing for Israelis, for the security of Israelis themselves, is to acknowledge that this viewpoint of I am surrounded by irrational beings that only understand force is harming them. It's harming Israelis. It's harming the Israeli project, even. So just sit down and talk. That's what I would say. Break the cycle. Um, okay, it's getting a little late for me, so I'm gonna just see if anyone else is not as I don't know first time chatter or something. Um, oh, Jay Maru, first time chatting. Thank you for letting us know that there's a USA press conference saying that the missile attacks were a failure. Uh, and yeah, I don't understand because we've seen the footage, even shared by the Israeli Ministry of Foreign Affairs its account on Twitter, of the attacks the missiles landing. So I don't know what's going on. Um, okay. The Pro Pork is a first-time chatter, so welcome. Says to add to this, interesting how the political West is mostly the Northwest and the East is the Northeast. Yeah, there's a lot of theories on how the Eastern Europeans have been racialized in international relations. So yeah, you're correct. Um, Astrogonza says, can we say Japanese people have been accepted in the global North despite racism? Um, well, yes and no. I don't have enough time to talk about this right now. I actually analyzed this in my PhD dissertation, so if you want to read my PhD, that's awesome. Um, but I would say that um, Japan tried to make a stake into the global north by saying, look at me, look at how Western I can be. And yet, despite that, didn't actually gain equal footing until a lot later on. Like, I guess um, after World War II, um, even after World War II, like during the occupation, I mean, you're not an equal if you're being occupied, right? So I think the history of Japan is a history of like a country saying, look how Western am I, which parenthetical led them to fascism. So that should make us think about what Western values are when a country says, "Look how Western I can be," and that the result is fascism. Um, so yeah, I think right now you might argue that they've managed to insert themselves in the global north, but it didn't come without imperialism. I would argue. Um, Broccoli 93 says also in their first time chat, if this is not related to Netanyahu needing the war to stay in power. Yes, absolutely. That is also true. Netanyahu needs to stay in power. and so that's why he's pursuing so many wars. But I don't think he can just declare random wars. He cannot just declare war on Egypt. He needs to declare wars against the places where he has strategic interest at play. Um, Rosova Tolerance is making an interesting claim saying that this is all projection from the West, that the West only understands violence and therefore believes that non-Western peoples only understand violence. This is an interesting argument. I would recommend you read Edward Said, who makes similar claims. So yeah. Um, Maru asks if it's safe to travel to Europe. I think it is. We're sort of expecting. I don't know. The security situation is. I would read the travel alerts in your own country to determine that. I wouldn't give you advice specifically. Like I can tell you, I feel relatively safe right now. I don't know how the situation might deteriorate. But yeah, I think you can come to Europe. Um, okay, so I'm missing something. So Chulo123 says on the 8th of October, Hezbollah bombed Sheba farms, which are Lebanese territory. Well, territory claimed by Lebanon and claimed by Syria as well, occupied by Israel. Did Israel have the right to retaliate against Hezbollah in the context of international law, bearing in mind that only military bases were targeted? Oh, that is a huge question, Chulo123. um, so, um, use of force against non-state actors is something that I covered in other videos, and I don't want to start that conversation right now because it's late already and it would take me a long time. So how about this? Why don't you join our Discord? I think Magic of Carols shared our Discord group there, and you bring that discussion to the Discord group, and we can have a chat there. Okay. Um, but okay, guys, we have been talking for an hour and 20 minutes. I'm gonna go continue follow the Twitter net and see what's going to happen with our world. Please join our Discord um, and keep on coming to these chats. Whenever something like this happens, I'll do another one of these. So hopefully, not many. So hopefully, the world doesn't go to hell. Um, but if I didn't answer any questions, please join the Discord channel and ask your question there so that I can have a little bit more time to answer it. Okay? Because it's already it's getting late here and I really need to like start wrapping this up. But thank you so much for coming randomly to my channel. I really appreciate it. And thank you for trusting in my thoughts. Hopefully you all felt comfortable discussing a complicated topic with me. Please tell your friends about the channel. I'm trying to make it grow. Please don't forget that we play video games on Thursdays and we talk about the world on Sundays. So tell your friends, follow, subscribe, do the thing. Really appreciate it. And hopefully this was of use. You certainly challenged me a lot with your questions. It was really fun to do it, even though it is a difficult time right now. So, oh, Boulevard of Dreams says that we hit 100 members on Discord. So yay! Celebration time. Amid horrible news. Um, but anyway, again, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for trusting me. You have at your disposal so much content, so many other places to be, and the fact that you are here watching my channel means a lot to me. I've learned from you today. I hope you learned from me. And yeah, see you soon. See you on Thursday, unless something else happens, and I need to do another one of these impromptu ones. Um, anyway, I will see you soon. Thank you for tuning in. Bye.